Picture the scene. It's the summer of 1642, and a ship makes landfall on the coast of Donegal. Now this ship isn't carrying some diplomat or politician. No, it's carrying something else entirely. A battle-hardened soldier, an exile, coming home after more than 30 years. And this man, Owen Roe O'Neill, was absolutely convinced that his homeland could be won back by force.
And that's really the key thing to get right from the very start. He wasn't there to negotiate. He wasn't there to find some kind of middle ground in the wars that were tearing Ireland apart. He was there for one reason: total victory, a complete reversal of everything that had been lost.
So, let's dive into that, because to really understand the absolute chaos of Ireland in the 1640s, you have to understand this one man. The man who showed up with 3 decades of brutal European warfare rattling around in his head and one single burning ambition in his heart.
Owen Roe wasn't just born into a family, he was born into a war. He was an O'Neill of Ulster, you see, part of the most powerful Gaelic clan in Ireland, born right in the middle of the final, desperate struggle against Elizabethan England. Resistance was basically in his DNA.
And that family connection? Oh, it's everything. His uncle was none other than Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone. We're talking about the guy who had shaken English power in Ireland to its absolute core. The name O'Neill alone was a symbol of defiance, a warning bell that every English official knew and dreaded.
So, when the Gaelic cause was finally defeated back in 1603, Owen Roe, like a lot of his generation, had to get out. He went into exile. But this wasn't some quiet retirement. For him, exile was a training ground, a 35-year military education in the most vicious, most sophisticated wars of the era.
You can almost see his transformation on this timeline. He joins the Spanish army, but it's that moment in 1607, the flight of the Earls, that really cements his mission. From then on, it's all about getting back. He spends the next few decades fighting in these huge continental wars, working his way up from a junior officer to a celebrated colonel, and it all comes to a head with his legendary defense of Arras. He wasn't just fighting, he was mastering modern warfare. Logistics, discipline, siegecraft, the whole shebang.
And this is what made him so incredibly dangerous. He wasn't coming back as just another Irish chieftain with a band of followers. No, he was a professional, a product of the ruthless, sophisticated military machine of 17th century Europe. He understood war on a level that few people in Ireland could even begin to imagine.
But the Ireland he came back to, it was a total mess. A chaotic swirl of competing factions and fractured armies. All the hope that came with his arrival just slammed into a very harsh reality. He was given command of the Confederate Army up in Ulster, but what he got was, well, it was nothing like the veteran troops he was used to leading.
I mean, just look at this contrast. On one side, you've got O'Neill's force. Mostly green recruits, barely any weapons, and always short on food and money. And on the other side, you've got seasoned enemies like the Scottish Covenanter Army and the local, well-established Protestant Lagan Army. The disadvantage he was at was just enormous. And the problems just kept piling up, and not just on the battlefield. His own kinsman was challenging his right to lead the O'Neills. The Confederate government he was supposed to be fighting for couldn't even agree on what they were fighting for. He even suffered a really tough defeat early on, at Clones. But even in those dark years, you could see flashes of his skill. At places like Portlister, he totally outsmarted an English force, building this reputation, this legend, bit by bit.
So for years, O'Neill is just stuck. He's frustrated, starved of the men and money he needs to build a real army. But then, in 1645, a new player arrives on the scene in Ireland. And this guy is about to change everything, finally giving O'Neill the chance to show the world what he could really do.
That player was the papal nuncio, Rinuccini, and he brought 2 things O'Neill was absolutely desperate for. First, money and weapons to finally equip and pay his soldiers properly. And second, a shared, uncompromising vision. Rinuccini didn't want a deal. He wanted a Catholic Ireland, and he saw Owen Roe as the general who could make it happen.
And this all leads to his masterpiece, the Battle of Benburb. And this wasn't just some bloody brawl. It was a chess match played on a massive scale. First, O'Neill completely outmaneuvered his opponent, basically forcing him to attack on O'Neill's terms. Then, he picked the ground perfectly, using the river and hills to his advantage. And finally, his now disciplined army executed his plan with perfect, devastating timing, completely shattering the veteran Scottish army.
And let's be crystal clear about this. Benburb was the single greatest battlefield victory the Irish Confederacy had in the entire 11-year war. It was a stunning, brilliant demonstration of military genius. It really should have been the turning point.
But it wasn't.
And the reason it wasn't, well, it's one of the great tragedies of this whole story. See, while Owen Roe O'Neill was a master of the battlefield, he was completely trapped by a political leadership that couldn't unite, not even after a massive victory.
This table really just lays out the problem. There was a war happening inside the war. On one side, you had O'Neill and Ruadh. They wanted to use the win at Benburb to push for a totally independent Catholic Ireland. But on the other side, you had the Supreme Council, who just wanted to cut a deal with the English royalists. They had completely different endgame goals, which led to total and complete distrust.
This all came to a head when they had a chance to take Dublin. The command was split between O'Neill and his rival, General Preston. They didn't trust each other, their armies couldn't work together, and the whole attack just fizzled out into a miserable failure. It was their best shot to capture the heart of English power in Ireland, and they completely blew it.
And believe it or not, it gets worse. By 1648, the political infighting had gotten so toxic that Owen Roe O'Neill, the Confederacy's greatest general, was literally at war with his own side. Just think about that for a second. The man who delivered their biggest victory was now their enemy.
So while all the Irish factions are busy fighting each other, a new, far more ruthless enemy was getting ready to cross the sea, an enemy that would make all their internal squabbles seem tragically, pathetically pointless.
Cromwell. The arrival of his new model army in 1649 was like a thunderclap that changed the entire world. This was not an army that came to negotiate, it came to conquer and to punish.
You know, there's nothing like an existential threat to focus the mind. The sheer brutality of Cromwell's campaign, especially the massacre at Drogheda, was a horrifying wake-up call for everyone. Suddenly, all those old divisions didn't matter so much. Faced with total annihilation, O'Neill finally cut a deal with his old rival, the Royalist commander Ormond. It was a desperate, last-minute alliance to try and save Ireland from what was coming.
And this was the alliance that maybe, just maybe, could have stood a chance. You've got O'Neill's military genius combined with what was left of the other armies. But history can be so unbelievably cruel. At the exact moment he was needed most, as he marched his army to finally join forces with Ormond, O'Neill's health gave out.
He died on November 6, 1649. His death left this brand new alliance totally leaderless at the most critical moment you can possibly imagine. The one commander who had proven he could beat a modern, disciplined army like Cromwell's was gone, just as the most formidable army of all landed on Irish soil. And that quote really is the perfect summary of his life. He was the general who almost united the Irish forces, the man who almost got the chance to face Cromwell in the field, the soldier who almost fulfilled the mission he'd carried with him his entire life. A story of incredible talent and brilliant potential, tragically unfulfilled right at the final hour.